See, unlike America would have us believe, the greatest problem confronting this country today is not pollution and bad breath. It's black people. It's black people. See, that's just one of the big lies that America tells you and that you go for because you chumps. You go for it. One of the lies that we tell ourselves is that we are making progress. But here his chair is empty. We're not making progress. We tend to equate progress with concessions. We can no longer make that mistake. You see, when they gave us that nigger astronaut, you say we were making progress, but I told you they were going to lose him in space. He didn't get that far. You put Adam Powell in office and you couldn't keep him. What you think they're going to do with Thurgood Marshall when they get tired of him? They gave you Walter Washington of Washington, D.C., and you said we were making progress. That's not progress. See, it's no in-between. You're either free or you're a slave. There's no such thing as second-class citizenship. But a lot of you running around talking about you Democrats, and the Democrats got you in the biggest trick going. They tell you it ain't our fault, it's the Dixiecrats. There's no such thing as a Dixiecrat. The only difference between George Wallace and Lyndon Johnson is one of them's wife got cancer.
I made a statement that if the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution cannot be enforced in this social jungle called Dixie, it is time that Negroes must defend themselves even if it is necessary to resort to violence. That there is no law here, and there is no need to take the white taxes to the courts because they will be freed, and that the federal government is not coming to the aid of people who are oppressed, and it is time for Negro men to stand up and be men, and that if it's necessary for us to die, we must be willing to die. If it's necessary for us to kill, we must be willing to kill.
Letters to my family, my mother, my father, sisters, my brother, Jonathan. They were intended to familiarize them with the situation I was faced with here. Of course, here in prison, we see the repression, the exploitation, the victimization of lower class people.
We ate whole foods, which people call natural foods, which does not include dairy products or salt or white sugar or any processed grains, which people call bleached white flour today and white rice today. We ate whole foods, yes. Mm-hmm. Mostly raw. Those in the seed family, and grains ripen early where sweet fruits ripen late. So what people buy in the store is unripe grains, which they call rice and beans, but they're unripe, so you have to kind of cook them to revert that sugar back to its natural state. But that's what we were eating. And that's been verified over and over again by just going to the pyramids, and they have paintings of what we ate in the pyramids, and in the papyrus and coffin texts they mentioned exactly what we eat and had paintings of it. We were doing correct food combining, not putting starch with meat, which is illogical and hampers your digestion, causes constipation and gas, which people call farting or something like that. So we weren't combining food incorrectly. We were on point now at one time.
Right.
But then we had this incursion with another people's diet, which was the starch and fat-centered diet, which we were put on during colonialism and slavery. And that's when everything started turning around. That's when we got into prolapsed uterus. That's when we got into fibroid tumors. That's when we got into infertility with that starch-centered diet.
Right. And
so they talked about how race is used. It's one of the factors that's used to decide who gets the one apple and who gets the 30 apples, and who gets no apples. It's not the only factor. Class is a reality in American society, as well as gender discrimination. Those are all realities in the society that help to determine kind of who's in the club and who's not in the club, or who gets the lion's or the lioness's share of the pie and who gets the crumbs. And so it caused us to look at race a little more critically. And the thing that was really eye-opening for a lot of people who identify themselves as white is that they talked about the fact that no matter how good your intentions are, that white supremacy is a system that kind of moves forward, and unless you become an anti-racist and you consciously work against it, then you are capitulating with it. Somebody described it as like one of those moving walkways at the airport, right? You stand on it, and it just, you don't have to do anything. You stand there, and it just moves you along. So that's kind of how white supremacy is. So unless first you become conscious of it, and then two, you dedicate yourself to both personal transformation and to being actively involved with others to dismantle it, then you're part of the problem also.
Mississippi is still a very rough place. People is not just walking up like they used to do in the past, walking out, shooting a man down or getting maybe 200 or 300 people carrying you out and lynching you, but it's in a more settled way. They can let you starve to death, not give you jobs. These are some of the things that's happening right now in Mississippi. See, Mississippi is not actually Mississippi's problem. Mississippi is America's problem. Because if America wanted to do something about what has been going on in Mississippi, it could have stopped by now. It wouldn't have been in the past few years between 40 and 50 churches bombed and burned. You see, and this lead me to say, all of the burning and bombing that was done to us and the houses, nobody never said too much about that, and nothing was done. But let something be burned, by a black man, and then, my God, you see, the flag is drenched with our blood. Because, you see, so many of our ancestors was killed because we have never accepted slavery. We had to live on it, but we've never wanted it. So we know that this flag is drenched with our blood. So what the young people are saying now, give us a chance to be young men, respected as a man, as we know this country was built on the black backs of black people across this country. And if we don't have it, you ain't gonna have it either, because we gonna tear it up. That's what they saying.
We see a completely non-racial society. We don't believe, for instance, in the so-called guarantees for minority rights, because guaranteeing minority rights implies the recognition of portions of the community on a race basis. We believe that in our country there shall be no minority, there shall be no majority, there shall just be people. And those people will have the same status before the law, and they will have the same political rights before the law. So in a sense, it will be a completely non-racial egalitarian society.
Will the vast number of blacks, after all their experiences, be able to live a life without giving vent to feelings of revenge, of
yes, we believe it is the duty of the vanguard political movement which brings about change to educate people's outlooks. I mean, in the same way that blacks have never lived in a socialist economic system, they're going to learn to live in one. In the same way that they've always lived in a racially divided society, they've got to learn to live in a non-racial society. They've got many things to learn, and all these must be brought to them and explained to the people by the vanguard movement, which is leading the revolution.
It is for me to inform you that the Universal Negro Improvement Association is an organization that seeks to unite into one solid body the 400 million Negroes of the world, to link up the 15 million Negroes of the United States of America with the 20 million Negroes of the West Indies, the 40 million Negroes of South and Central America with the 280 million Negroes of Africa, for the purpose of bettering our industrial, commercial, educational, social, and political
Because there's only one way they can do it, and if they do it, we're not going to be around very long. In other words, any group of people, if they're going to survive, they have to have an economic foundation. There's a block in Chicago where there are 7 storefront churches on one side of the street and 8 storefront churches on the other side of the street. And if you go into the average black neighborhood in a big city, you'll see a storefront church, a saloon, a liquor store, a gambling joint. No business enterprise is bringing any money into the community. Now, the only way we're going to beat this is to get the young people to organize into cooperative societies. If you need $1 million to go into business, try to get together a large number of people, and each one of them puts up a few dollars, and you put it all together, and you've got enough money to go into business. I'm a member of a cooperative food market in Chicago. We have 11,000 members. Each member owns at least one share in the business. That's $10. We have a credit union, our own bank. Some of the people have thousands of dollars invested in the business, and it pays 6% interest, so that's just as good as putting it in the bank. Now, here's 11,000 people. They and their families buy their groceries at this store. It's a big building, takes up nearly a whole block, like an old-fashioned railroad station. We draw interest on our shares. We get good food at a reasonable price, and we give a lot of jobs to young people. Now, if you want to survive, you form cooperative societies, pool together whatever your money you can get, go into business for yourself, and then see to it that you educate yourself. And that means you've got to learn to read. You're not going to get it on television and radio.
I think that when we talk about race, we tend to focus on individual acts of prejudice, which is why UKIP often come up, because they'll overtly say stuff that we find offensive. But unfortunately, the issue of race, if we understand it, is a lot more insidious. And it takes a lot more of a historical view to understand the difference between individual bias and structural racism and privilege. And the idea of Great Britain was intimately tied to the fact that Britain's invaded almost every country on the earth, literally. No, literally, there's a map, you can Google it. And so the idea of our greatness was intimately tied to this idea of empire, which was intimately tied to what Rudyard Kipling calls the white man's burden, to go and civilize all these stupid brown folks that have been writing and having civilizations for thousands of years. But let's forget all of that. And so if we fast forward to today, when we talk about structural racism in Britain, do we have the same institutional disparities in rates of imprisonment that they have in America? Yes, absolutely we do. Do we have the same disparities in terms of who's dying in police custody? Yes, indeed we do. In 2011, we were told we loved Libyans so much we wanted to bomb democracy into them. Less than 5 years later, we're leaving people fleeing the same conflict to drown in the sea, while giving a woman space in a national newspaper to refer to them as cockroaches. And when you refer to humans as cockroaches, that is a mandate for murder. Let's be clear about that. The moment human beings become non-human, that is a mandate for murder, and there's a long historical parallel with that. Today, Germany, the country that bombed this country, in our grandparents' lifetimes, so theoretically the grandchildren of Nazis can get in and out of England easier than the grandchildren of people from the Commonwealth who fought against the Nazis. And where do they come from? When we talk about immigrants, do we mean people from Australia and New Zealand? Didn't Boris Johnson go to Australia and say, hey, we're culturally the same? Was he talking about the Aborigines when he said that?
We call them expats.
Right. White people have such a different way of classifying themselves that white immigrants are expats. Yeah. And non-white immigrants are immigrants. So when we say immigrants, if we go to border control, we can go there, Yarlswood, and we go and look at who's there. It's not a bunch of white people from New Zealand. So we have structural forms of privilege and bias.
So the idea is to show excellence, So if you look at the wall, this is mathematics, and you see some other African art pieces, like this is from the Congo. You see other African art pieces. Remember, Kemet was the mouthpiece of the African continent. So everything you saw in Kemet, this didn't come from the Nile Valley. We were expressing the whole African continent. It's just that in Kemet, we recorded it. We wrote it in stone. We put it in the universities. But all the teachers in Kemet didn't just come from the Nile Valley. You might have had a teacher who came from the West Africa. You have another teacher who came from South Africa. They all taught in ancient Kemet. Okay, so that's where the universities were. Okay, here again, you see our architecture engineering was inside of our buildings. So this is science at the highest level when you saw this. We created the most profound writing system that the world has ever known. So you see the art all around at every stage. And hopefully young people can see that these are all black people.
Good evening. We are very glad to have you with us for this very special program. This program is special because with this evening's guest, we reach a plateau in our quest to find out who we have been and who we are. Our guest is one of the leading anthropologists and Egyptologists in the world, Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop. Dr. Diop was born in Senegal, and at age 23 he went to Paris, France to continue advanced studies in physics. In 1966, the first World Black Festival of Arts and Culture, held in Dakar, Senegal, honored Dr. Diop and Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois as the scholars who exerted the greatest influence on black thought in the 20th century. Dr. Diop, who is also a linguist, is director of the Radiocarbon Laboratory at the Fundamental Institute of Black Africa at the University of Dakar in Senegal. In this first segment, Dr. Diop discusses the evolution of mankind.
One of the mistakes which some political analysts make is to think that their enemies should be our enemies. That we can and we will never do. We have our own struggle which we are conducting. We are grateful to the world for supporting our struggle. But nevertheless, we are an independent organization with its own policy. And the attitude of every country towards, our attitude towards any country is determined by the attitude of that country to our struggle.
Well, contrary to popular belief, his attitude towards his family was a very warm one. And although my husband traveled a lot, we had a very close relationship in the sense that whenever he would go away, I could always expect a letter, if not every day, every other day. And I could always expect a phone call. And now I think the great emptiness is not so much that he's away right now, but that he's away and I'll never get another letter from him, or I won't hear from him again. And when my children began to, after he's gone for a period of time, they began to ask me different things about him. They draw pictures and write little notes for him, and they're piling up. And I guess when they really start asking about him, I don't really know exactly how to explain to him that he'll never return. And I think there's a great emptiness.
That entity, whatever it is, it has two choices. It will either cease to exist, or it will have to adapt and adjust to this new environment. But in adapting to this new environment, it must give up very specific things that are essential to its own well-being. And that's what we've done. And what we've given up is our spiritual fortitude. What we've given up is our ability to transcend, three-dimensional constructs, and to live in a place, where we are consistently and totally at the mercy of fear and all these other low-based negative emotional fields. And
the ancient Egyptian, the Coptic Egyptians, and the Moors all vanished, and the Negro appeared. So today, as you and I and our children go to school over in this hemisphere in America, we are taught away from ancient Egypt. That's done on purpose, Clemson. It's taught away from it. They don't want us to identify with our ancestors, ancient Egyptians. You know what would happen to white supremacy? If they taught us that we were descendants of the ancient Egyptians, white supremacy would fall flat on its face. Because they can't say that we're inferior anymore. We can say that they are inferior if we so desire. Because of our ancestors left us an immortal legacy to be superior, if we want to use that term. You see that? So
if you travel on the route, you better put your compass on the right course. So all these years, we have been following medical science. They say that disease is what? Germ, virus, bacteria. I said no. It's the food that you eat. The food better be consistent with you. Gorilla does not eat polar bear food. But if the gorilla ever make the mistake and put into its mouth the food of the polar bear, he too would find diseases that we are finding ourselves with. It happened right here in New York in the zoo. Gorillas in the zoo got diabetes, not in the forest.
The sun's a setting. This is what I'm gonna sing. Sun's a setting. This is what I'm gonna sing. I feel the blues are coming. I wonder what the blues will bring. In a drowsy, syncopated tune, rocking back and forth to a mellow croon, I heard a Negro play. Down on Lenox Avenue the other night, by the pale, dull pallor of a one-bulb light, he did a lazy sway. He did a lazy sway to the tune of those weary blues.
When they took you from Africa and they banned you from being called Kunta Kinte, Rasul, or Muhammad.
That's right.
When they took us on that westerly course, then they forced us into their names.
Teach.
And they called us Smith, Jones, Robinson, Green, Brown, Hogg. A black man called Mr. White. And when we go to China, and we put our passport down, and the Chinese immigration control official looks at that passport and he sees Mr. White, he expects to see a white man. And when he sees the black man, he says, uh-oh, this man doesn't know who he is.
Actual fact.
But many of us as black people today, we're very foolish people.
Right.
Because we don't understand why another man gives you his name. Because when he gives you his name, the giving of another's name denotes possession. It means he owns you. As long as you're walking in another man's name, he knows he owns you. You can talk as strong as you like. Yeah, I'm for black, yeah, Mrs. White. Yeah, they're laughing at you. Because they know that when you take another's name, that's why in marriage, in the tradition of marriage, the woman takes the man's surname.
Go ahead.
And leaves her maiden name, because that taking of the other's name denotes possession. In the event of divorce, you don't walk around with the other man's name. You now relinquish that name because you're no longer with that one.
Africa is rich and not poor. As the great wealth that has been taken out of our continent over 5 centuries of spoliation and extortion, very well put. Africa has immense actual and potential wealth: gold, diamond, copper, manganese, bauxite, iron ore, uranium, asbestos, chrome, cobalt, a host of other minerals. Our essential agricultural produce have all been drained away by colonialist imperialism. Africa is far from being poor. It is Africans who are poor, not Africa.
It is not a southern problem. It is a national problem. What is happening in New Orleans today began to happen over 100 years ago when, in effect, the North, which was the government, having freed tens of thousands of illiterate black men, they made no provision for them, none whatever. None whatever. They were dumped on the body politic, and no one was responsible for them. And they were, of course, immediately political and industrial footballs for everybody. They were everybody's target. In a way, black men were very useful to the American because in a country so absolutely undefined, so amorphous, where there were no limits, no height really, and no depth, there was one thing of which one could be certain. One knew where one was by knowing where the Negro was. You knew that you were not on the bottom because the Negro was there. You knew, one knows what sin is in the same way. One knows what danger is in the same way. Now, this implies a vision of oneself, it seems to me, and a vision of the world which doesn't stop at the American borders. It is also the way America deals with the world.
When you come to them and say, look, we got to get free. Time's running out. Our condition is getting worse. They say, what are you talking about? Oprah is one of the richest people in America. What are you talking about? We got Montel, Les Brown, all of Burtis, all Barry, all of them now on TV. We on the edge of night, Search for Tomorrow, All My Children. What do you mean, Medical Center? We got special episodes with us. We've had the Cosby Show. We got everything. What do you mean? We've got PhDs, LLDs, DMs, MDs. You name the D, we got all the Ds. What you mean? What are you concerned about? What are you talking about? So it becomes extremely difficult to get them to understand that those are illusions. Illusions that have been created to keep us pacified, quiet, and stupid about our condition. Now, 400 years of systematic conditioning has created a mental condition that no longer makes plantations necessary, no longer makes chains necessary, no longer makes dogs necessary, no longer makes segregation necessary, no longer requires any of those external circumstances, because the conditioning and the illusion has created such a situation so that you now operate in your own enslaving interest.
Welcome to Like It Is. This edition will focus on the government surveillance of Malcolm X. We'll also have an interview with two men who spent a lot of time at Malcolm's side as he attempted to elude assassination. We'll hear that harrowing story and more right after these words.
The opportunity on this visit to Los Angeles to speak to you on world peace and revolt in Africa. These subjects, together with that of the problems of minorities in the United States, form in fact one problem when brought together and viewed in unity. It is that task which I ask you to permit me to essay tonight, and to approach it from the point of view of what we usually call the Negro problems. All so-called social problems tend to merge. They all have to do with human actions. and are based on human customs, and treat the numerous and intricate relations of human beings.
This Aristotle too. You see, when Aristotle is a great, so he said like, look, the old men in humanity are Kemet people, not us. They're old people. Their civilization is very old. 2, mathematics start, what we call mathematics, start in Kemet. Why? Because the priests have a lot of time, they can study something like that. But maybe, there is maybe it's good or not good, but he said that mathematics start in Kemet. When you try to translate, but it's more clear in Greek, you see. Mathematica technai sustesan in Hypo-Egypton. When the Peri-Egypton, Peri doesn't mean around Kemet. So they usually translate mathematics start around Kemet when you check the translation. So I check the Peri means in fact the around, Peri means around. But I check the best translation in Western civilization, Oxford people. So they don't translate around. How can be around? There is no around Kemet, then nothing is there. So they translate in Kemet itself. This is the best translation. So mathematics start, sustesan, that's the anteriority, the word anteriority is there in this kind of tense. You say, sustesan, the anteriority start first in the beginning, start first, proton, start first. You see, it's said by Andy Love, Egyptian astronomy. He said they're the best because they have a debate on the comet. You see? And he said, no, the way we think is not right. The best way to think about this everybody is a Kemet people. You must know that, you see. So, all of them, this is Plutarch, we talk about him too. This is Aristotle student. So, yes, next. So, you see, all of them systematically, or what you call philosopher, scholar, when you check one by one, you study them, where they came from, what they say themselves, all of them systematic, they have a link, connection, education with a Kemet people, you see. You see, this is a King Tut, of course. You know the picture, this is one of the masks, is African guy, the lips, the nose, everything. Now they try to change. If they give me a Chinese computer, Tutankhamun will be like a Chinese. Yes, next. They're the same. You see, they're the same. So these people, they focus on education always. Yeah? Up you mighty race, up. That means we say educated first. How you can be up without education? Education can make students, kids more alert and more human beings. So always up you is the same tradition of philosophy. You see?